All right, well, good morning, grade 8. We are moving right along. Lesson 4.5b, the second part of that, graphing the linear equation using intercepts. So, of course, when we talk about intercepts, we're talking about the x-intercept. We're talking about the y-intercept. And we have already talked about that these are actually ordered pairs. The x-intercept is a point on the coordinate plane. The y-intercept is a point on the coordinate plane. Now we talk about the y-intercept. If we envision a coordinate plane here, nothing fancy, but the y-intercept is where the line crosses the y-axis, for example, right there. We know that the y-intercept is right on the y-axis. Thus, the y-intercept, x, is always 0, okay? That first number is always going to be 0. In a previous lesson, we were talking about the x-intercept. The x-intercept is always on the x-axis, for example, right there, okay? It's not up or down at all. Thus, as we did in a previous lesson, we always make y 0. So we have the x coordinate, and then we know that y is always 0. So this is a different way of going about and being able to graph lines by using the intercepts. So 2x minus y equals 8. As always, the first thing we want to do is get everything in slope-intercept form. Okay, so it's going to be negative y equals, I'm going to subtract 2x from both sides. That's going to give me negative 2x plus 8. Now, I can't have negative y, okay? So I'm going to multiply everything by negative 1. That's going to give me y. That's going to make my negative 2x, 2x, and that's going to make my positive 8, negative 8. Y equals 2x minus 8. Now, I'm going to go ahead. This x plus 3y equals 6. I'm going to put that one on this board here, and we'll come back to that later. It'll give me a little more room here, and we'll just do that one on the other board. Okay, so we've gotten now ourselves in slope-intercept form. Y equals 2x minus 8. So first thing I'm going to do is figure out the x-intercept by making y 0. So it's going to be 0 equals 2x minus 8, which means if I add 8 to both sides, I get 0 there. I'm trying to isolate x. I'm going to add 8 there. I get 0. No, sorry. I get 8. And that leaves me with 8 equals 2x. Well, if 8 equals 2x, I'm going to divide everything by 2 to isolate x, and that tells me that x equals 4. That means when I go to my graph, x has to equal 4. So I go to my x-axis, and I put a dot on 4. Now it's time to figure out what the y-axis is. The y-axis, or the y-intercept, we already have it in slope-intercept form. So we know that it's negative 8. Okay? So I'm going to go to my graph, and I'm going to zoom in there a little bit. Negative 8. When you actually do your assignment, you'll need to make a straight edge. You'll need to use a straight edge, but it's kind of hard to do that holding the camera and holding a marker. But you get the idea. And of course, we put arrows to show that the line is ever going. So you don't even have to actually go through the process of making x 0 to figure out y. I mean, you could, but if you already have it in slope-intercept form, you know what the y-intercept is going to be. All right, let's look at a second example. X plus 3y equals 6. All right, well, I want to isolate the 3y, so I'm going to subtract x from both sides. That's going to leave me with 3y equals negative x, because there's nothing over here to subtract it from, plus 6. So 3y equals negative x plus 6. Now, so I need to isolate y, but I'm going to do that by dividing everything by 3. So I'm going to do y equals negative x over 3, and then I'm going to do 6 divided by 3, and that's going to be a plus 2. Now, I know that I have to have a coefficient with x, so I'm not going to think about this being divided by 3. As an 8th grader, I need to remember that when I divide something by 3, or 3 over 1, it's the same as multiplying it by 1 over 3. So I need to write this as a multiplication problem. So instead of negative x over 3, I'm going to say y equals negative 1/3 x plus 2. So now I know my y-intercept. I'm going to bring over my other graph here. I know my y-intercept. My y-intercept is 2. So I'm going to come over here to my graph. My y-intercept is 2. I'm going to go ahead and put my point there. Now I need to figure out the x-intercept. And remember, to figure out the x-intercept, I make y 0. So I know now that 0 equals negative 1/3 x plus 2. All right, 0 equals negative 1/3 x plus 2. Now, when looking at this, I'm like, okay, so I need to isolate the x, so I'm going to subtract 2 from both sides, okay? So I'm going to subtract 2 here. That's going to give me negative 2. So that's going to leave me with negative 2 equals a negative 1/3 x, which means I'm going to isolate everything by dividing everything by negative 1/3. So I know it's a negative divided by a negative, so it's going to be a positive. So I'm just going to do some scratch work here. I'm just going to pretend that it's 2 over 1 being divided by 1 over 3. But as I know, I've got to make that 2 over 1 times 3 over 1, making the reciprocal. 2 over 1 times 3 over 1 is going to equal 6 over 1, which is going to equal 6. X equals 6. So I go to my graph, I go to my x-axis, x equals 6, and then I would just go ahead, kind of an awkward angle here, but you get the idea. On your assignment, you would have to use a straight edge, but for our purposes there, that'll work. All right, talk to you later, 8th grade. Bye.